you one thing about going forward, okay? What did you do this offseason specifically to try to become a better player, a better quarterback?
I think just the overall development, and trying to grow in every part of my game. You know, every time you go into an off season, for me at least, I look at guys like MJ and Kobe and how they kind of diagnose their game, and obviously two different sports, but just trying to kind of push forward my strengths and get better at my strengths and the things that I do well, and then turn my weaknesses into my strengths.
Jalen Hurts, the Eagles quarterback, MVP finalist last year, great contract this year, great player, great leader, great person, great everything. Eagles trying to do something even more rare than what we discussed earlier with the possibility of the Chiefs repeating. There have been multiple, and I know it's been nearly 20 years, but plenty of repeat winners of the Super Bowl. There's only been two teams that lost it one year and came back and won it the next year. The Dolphins, Super Bowl 6-7, and the Patriots, Super Bowl 52-53. Now, grand scheme of things, that one wasn't that long ago. But the Eagles, that's exactly what they're trying to do. Go back to what Dennis Green called the Valley of 0-0 and dig out again in a competitive division. Not as competitive a conference as the AFC, but what's their biggest challenge, Peter, in checking the boxes like they did last year and getting back, regardless of whether they win or lose, just getting back to the top of the mountain again?
You know, my feeling, and it's going to sound crazy, I think the biggest challenge is keeping Jalen Hurts upright for 17 games. I do not like their backup quarterback situation with Marcus Mariota, at least right now. So there's that. But, Mike, if I can tell you two scenes that I saw in training camp. I sat with Nick Sirianni in his office for a while before the practice that I saw. And I said, tell me a little bit about Jalen Hurts. And I just threw this out. I said, what was that moment like after he signed his contract when you had the first conversation? He signs this historic contract. And he said, I don't remember his exact words, but they were something like, okay, let's get to work. And everybody who said, oh, that's corny, I'm just telling you right now, that is Jalen Hurts. Sirianni told me that you walk into the quarterback room now, and the quarterbacks are talking about either that practice or a play they're installing or whatever. And he said, I'm listening to Jalen Hurts, and I think I'm listening to the quarterback coach, because he is the guy who knows all the tiny things now after being in this offense for a while. Instead of being the guy, the sponge, who's soaking it in, he's the guy who's dictating the knowledge to everybody else in the room. That's number one. The second thing, totally different thing. So there was a play in this practice that I saw where after the play, Lane Johnson, the all-pro right tackle of the Eagles, goes across the line of scrimmage, and he's talking to Jalen Carter. Okay, obviously the controversial lightning rod, 9th pick in the draft. I think he was the 9th pick by the Eagles.
Yes.
And then and also Nolan Smith. He's talking to those guys, his fellow Georgia Bulldog defensive linemen. And he's talking to those guys. And, I come to find out that what he was doing is he was giving both of them advice. And he's talking to them about, here's what you should do on your get off. And here's a thought about what I just saw and what you did. And so I'm just thinking to myself, after I hear that story, I'm thinking to myself, the Eagles not only have the best roster in football, which I believe they do. The Eagles not only have the best roster in football, they've got guys on the offense who, it's a very competitive thing in practice at all times. You got guys on your offense who are trying to teach guys on the defense to beat me, and to beat me in practice. And so I find this attitude for guys like Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata also, even though he's fairly new at it, he's one of those guys who also will say, hey, maybe if you did this, it'd be better. Jason Kelsey, obviously, is that guy at center. So anyway, the only point I'm making about all this is that the Philadelphia Eagles have a great roster, and they have a roster, honestly, with players who understand that the only way we're better is if we are all better.
I want to take this all the way back, though, to the first thing you said, because I agree with you. Starters, the first string 22, best roster in football. But we know that the Eagles regard QB2 as one of the most important 10 or 11 positions on the entire team. And between Marcus Mariota and Tanner McKee, I don't feel great about where the Eagles will be if Jalen Hurts isn't available, like he wasn't available down the stretch last year after he suffered a shoulder injury against the Bears.
That does worry me.
So at this point, what can they do? We've seen some quarterback churning this week, and they're standing pat. What can they do, if anything, to try to avoid that potential outcome? Because, look, in my mind, it's the 49ers and the Eagles atop the NFC. But it's not going to take much of a wobble. It's not going to take many injuries to open the door to the next level of teams to try to knock one or both of them out.
I'll just say this, and I don't have a lot of faith in Marcus Mariota. But I will say this. The offensive coordinator is a rising star coach in the NFL. His name is Brian Johnson. And as much as the Eagles were a bit chagrined to lose both coordinators to head coaching jobs, including Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator, to Indianapolis, there was no hesitation in giving this job to Brian Johnson. Nick Sirianni believes that Brian Johnson is an excellent teacher, not only of quarterbacks, but of the offense. Sirianni has got his hands in the pie, and I believe that Brian Johnson is going to make Marcus Mariota a project of his, and going to make sure that if he has to play, he's going to be better than he looked down the end or down the stretch of when he played in Atlanta last year. Can he do that? It'll be really, really tough, because I think you and I have both seen the weaknesses, the problems. And too often, Marcus Mariota, instead of just sitting there reading the defense and choosing a guy to throw the ball to, just takes off. I saw it again in training camp. It doesn't help your offense if the quarterback takes off and breaks a design play. And okay, so he gains 8 yards. Who cares? We're not in this to make the quarterback gain yardage by running the ball on a broken play. You're in this to make sure that he's comfortable enough in the offense and he can make A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, and Smith comfortable catching the ball from him. And I think that is what Brian Johnson, that's his job over the next few weeks. And hey, look, I'm sure they hope that they never have to use the backup quarterback, and I get it. But logically, with Jalen Hurts exposing himself and running a lot, you might need the backup quarterback at some point.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.